Have you ever wondered why other photographers' photos are so polished and professional looking, and why yours just don't seem to have that same wow factor? Well, there's actually a lot of reasons, but today I'm going to show you the 5 biggest editing mistakes that cause the biggest problems that the pros don't make, but that are destroying your photos. I'll show you what these mistakes are, how you can quickly and easily fix them, and I'll share the secret to consistently turning out images with more pop and wow factor than ever before. But first, there's one thing that you've got to do in camera that will literally increase the quality of your image files before you even open them in Photoshop, and it's as easy as flicking a switch. Which brings us on to mistake number 1. To demonstrate, imagine you've baked a lovely chocolate cake, but when you take it out of the oven, you realise you've forgotten to mix the cocoa powder into the batter, and you've only used half the sugar. Well, maybe you can top the cake in a sweet chocolate frosting to cover up your mistake, and maybe it wouldn't taste that bad, but it still wouldn't be a sweet chocolate cake, would it? When you make this first photography mistake, this is exactly what's happening with your image files. Setting your camera to capture JPEGs and not RAW files is the equivalent of baking your photos in your camera, because when capturing JPEG, your camera applies its picture style to your photos using its own recipe to decide what your image should look like, and then it will bake those edits into a lower quality JPEG file. Now, you might be able to add some frosting after it comes out of the oven, but you'll never be able to go back and fix that original recipe. But when your camera captures RAW files, it just gives you those raw ingredients, no recipe, no baked in picture styles. Not only that, when your camera baked you a JPEG, it threw out all those leftover ingredients from the pantry. With a RAW file, you get the full pantry's worth of ingredients to work with from the start, meaning you can take full control of how the cake turns out using all of the available ingredients. But with that said, it's no use at all having a full pantry of ingredients if you're going to make this next big mistake that I see people making all the time. So now you have all the raw ingredients available to bake the perfect version of your photo in editing, and it already looks okay because you did a good job in camera, so it will just need a few subtle touches to bring the best out of the image. It's like your cake batter is almost there, but you taste it, and it just needs a touch more sweetness, and so you pour half a pound of sugar into the bowl, mix it up and give it another taste. Now it's way too sweet, so you throw in a handful of flour to level it out. Now it's too thick, so you pour in a big glug of milk, and the cycle repeats until you're just left with nothing but a sticky mess, all because you tried adding too much of each ingredient at a single time. So when you make a single adjustment that adds too much contrast, saturation or detail in one big move, it's a recipe for an over-processed and amateurish result. Instead, here's what I recommend you do. Make lots of small, subtle adjustments instead of a few big ones. It's as simple as that, really. So we're making progress. Now you're shooting in RAW, and you're making lots of small, gradual adjustments to your photos to create a refined and subtle result. But if you're still making this next mistake, then you're making the whole editing process 10 times harder than it needs to be. So imagine adding ingredients, tweaking your recipe, tasting as you go, so you can hone in on that perfect flavour and consistency. Then you realise you've added too much butter to your batter. That's fun to say. When baking an actual cake, the only way to fix too much butter is to put more of the other ingredients in to balance out your ratios. But what if there was a way that you can actually remove that extra butter that you've already mixed in? Well, in Photoshop, there is a way to do that, unless you're making mistake number 3, which is destructive editing. Working destructively is when you apply edits directly to your image, altering the pixels within it each time. So the only way to change an adjustment you just added is to undo it and then do it again. And the only way to change an adjustment you added 3 adjustments ago, if you change your mind, is to undo all 3 of them and do them all again. Now when you stop making this mistake and start working non-destructively using adjustment layers and smart objects, you can alter any adjustment anytime without affecting any of the other adjustments you've made. So not only is this a massive time saver because you don't have to redo everything when you want to go back and change one thing you did a while ago, but editing destructively can actually decrease the quality of your pixels in your image too, meaning non-destructive editing actually results in a higher quality image at the end. But the thing is, you can stop shooting JPEGs, you can start making subtle adjustments, and you can use non-destructive editing techniques and still end up with photos that can look amateurish and over-processed, unless you avoid this next big editing mistake, which I call over-blending. So let's return to the cake analogy again. Sugar makes a cake taste good, chocolate tastes pretty good too, so do eggs, butter, vanilla. But bake a cake with as much sugar, chocolate, eggs, butter, vanilla as you possibly can, and God knows how it's going to turn out. Sickly, sweet, greasy, eggy. Don't fancy an eggy cake much, but if you get the balance of ingredients wrong, then it's going to taste weird one way or another. I still see so many people making this mistake in their photography, and when you know about it, I think it's the one thing you'll probably recognise most in a lot of other photos. When I first noticed it, I know that I immediately felt the urge to go back and re-edit so many of my own older photos. But the thing is, it's an easy mistake to make, so how do photographers end up making this blunder? Well, you want to see all that amazing detail in the dark, shadowy parts of a photo. So you make the shadows lighter. Then you want to intensify those warm, light sunrise colours in the sky, so you end up darkening and saturating them to really bring those colours out and make them. But the problem with that is that when you go too far with it, you end up overblending your image. The balance of ingredients just goes completely out of whack. And when the dark stuff is too light and the light stuff is too dark, everything ends up looking the same and you lose all sense of what's up and what's down. So, think about it. When was the last time you looked towards the sun on the horizon and it was actually darker than everything else around it that it's supposed to be lighting up? Yet, like I said, I still see so many people doing this when editing their photos. Now, let me ask you a question. If you edited a photo today and then again in a few weeks' time, how confident are you that they would turn out looking the same? If you didn't answer totally confident, then you're probably suffering from this next big editing mistake. And that could be preventing you from creating a consistent style of your own. Because the reason you can edit a photo that looks great one time, and then your next efforts look slightly different, maybe slightly better, maybe slightly worse, is that you're too willy-nilly with what adjustments you're making and when. So you're adding a little bit of this over here, a little bit of that there, testing an adjustment, seeing what it looks like, and then testing the next technique that you just learned on YouTube to see how that looks. But the thing is, if you really want to have consistently high quality results, you need to follow the same consistent steps each and every time. Here's another thing, you don't actually need to learn a single new technique to fix the problem. You just need to start doing the same things in the same order each time. But the question I hear you asking now is,
what order should I do things in, Steve?
Well, for that I've got you covered as well. You could either start out by looking at a bunch of your favourite old photos and analysing how and why they turned out so well, and you can use that as a template for your future edits. Might take a bit of time to discover any patterns, but you'd eventually get there. Or, instead of figuring it all out yourself, you can shortcut that entire learning curve by downloading a PDF cheat sheet where I've laid out my own simple 6-stage editing workflow. And it's a workflow that's been downloaded by over 52,000 photographers so far. So just click the link in the description or pinned comment, enter your name and email, and I'll send it right over to you.